Having me on your program.
Now, I opened the commentary referring to those Toledo ritualistic murderers. We haven't heard much about it. Has the whole thing been hushed up? What is the attitude of authorities when they discover children having been murdered or ritualistic slayings? How do they approach this whole thing?
Well, let me comment on that by telling you a little story that I uncovered with Jim Jones when I was working on that. Jim Jones used to tell people that survived a massacre and his members in large, he said, I really don't care if you talk to the public or if you talk to the press or the police, because what we're doing here is so bizarre, no one would ever believe you. And he was right. And I'm finding in my work that when we first started looking into the satanic-type ritual murders and everything, and kids claiming that they were forced to kill other children, that it is simply so bizarre no one will believe them. I think that is one of the biggest problems facing law enforcement, to look beyond the bizarreness. I just told a group of chiefs of police in Pennsylvania that one of the best covers is a bizarre murder, because we don't want to look beyond that, and we have to.
I was tremendously impressed with the program on Satanism that you produced. I had just checked into a hotel room, and my assistant called me and said, quick, turn on your TV, and there it was. And in that, you gave some clues as to what people should look for in regards to the involvement of their children in satanic cults. What should parents have an eye out for, for example, in their kid's bedroom?
Sure. One of the things that I would suggest to parents, and by the way, we literally scratched that topic, even though we worked on it for 14 months, is not to tell them to turn the music down, but to turn it up and to listen to it, to listen to the lyrics, to look at the covers of the posters in their bedrooms and the covers on records. These artists claim, and I use the word loosely, artists, that they're just playing around with this issue, and they're playing around with Satanism. But if you listen to the words, they're pretty damning, and I think parents should know what their children are listening to.
You spent months investigating that Jonestown tragedy, and your research indicates Jim Jones really had planned the whole thing all along. He deliberately abducted those children, and he knew he was going to kill them. How do you base those conclusions?
Well, Bob, I was very fortunate. 2 whole days I Xeroxed copies of Jim Jones and documents and material. One, I was able to document that they used the courts of California to legally take the children away from the parents, legally, by taking the guardianship of the child away from the natural parents. We have dozens and dozens of those legal documents, and as a result, California finally straightened up their act by making it more difficult to take over the guardianship of a child. Number 2, I found out that even when he was in Indiana and people said he was a good guy who went wrong later, he would legally take the children away from the parents. And he did it. We have documents. We have the papers showing how he did it. Then in Guyana, his whole thing was to obtain immortality by doing what he did, and that was to murder those children. It was not a suicide. By common law, a child cannot take their life, a 2-year-old child, an 8-year-old child. He planned the murder, and he killed them. The chief medical examiner told me, Dr. Mutu, who was one of the first people there on the scene, that there were hypodermic needles sticking out of the children, out of their necks, out of their backs and shoulders. It was murder, pure and simple. And Jones was a master PR guy. You know what he did? He had a couple that were murdered, and he put a child in between them. He knew when the press would come in, 1, the press would be controlled. 2, the press would see something like that and snap the picture. Newsweek did that. And what image was created? A mass suicide. They were murdered, and it was so ruled by a judge down in Guyana. It was murder, pure and simple.
Again, child molestation, murderers, missing children. What's your comment? What do you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing I wanted to ask is, what can we do as Christians now? Is there a group where we could send money, support, letters, or whatever? I myself, I had quite an experience when I was younger. I was raised by Christian people, and yet when they dropped me off at the babysitter, I don't think they knew who and what. They really didn't know. So there was a few things that had happened to myself when I was younger that for some reason God didn't let that, control my life.
So what you're interested in knowing is how people such as yourself can get involved in fighting this whole problem in society.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hang on, Teresa. Dr. Wooden?
Well, one of the things that we did, Bob, after interviewing people who murdered and molested children, was to find out how they did it. How did they lure the child, you know? And we did the booklet that you were talking about. But we also did a videotape to train people like your caller so that she can train an army of children to watch out for those very clever and those very effective lures. So that's one thing. They can literally train themselves. But another thing they can do, Bob, and I hope all of your listeners hear this, we have found that a lot of very, very good Christians are literally afraid to talk about sex to their children. I saw a survey where 80% of the parents will not talk about sex to their children. Molesters told us if a child knows nothing about sex, that child is a piece of cake because they have a curiosity and they play upon that curiosity to molest the child. So we really have to teach our children some very basic sexual beliefs so they know that someone shouldn't be fooling with them.
Okay, Rick's on the line listening to KGVW. Rick?
Hi, Bob. I just wanted to ask Mr. Wooden, when they did the documentary, I was just astounded. My mouth was just wide open at the end of that thing, and it really showed to me the power of Satan in this world and his control. What I was a little dismayed in was at the end of the program, they didn't really give an answer to what they could do spiritually or it didn't seem like practically what they could do about that.
Well, there are certainly some constraints, I'm sure, in working with ABC and being able to do that type of thing. But what really do you suggest, Dr. Wooden, in relationship to both the authorities perhaps being more aggressive in this area, as well as perhaps citizens forcing the issue of saying, hey, let's uncover and find out what's going on?
Well, first of all, I do want to commend ABC for having the guts to do it, okay, because it took a lot of guts, and we did do it. Parents really got to know that the occult is widespread. We found it in all 50 states. We found murders in 27 states. And what parents really got to not laugh off Satanism. Some people, some very fine Christians, say, oh, that's old-fashioned. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
To laugh it off is to really set up your child. I believe that. We have to let them know the tactics that they use. We tried to bring some of those tactics out. How they desecrate churches, how they destroy family values, how they use the music, and how they use drugs for their purposes, and how they even use written material like the Satanic Bible.
You know, there's a major debate going on right now as to the statistics regarding the number of missing children. People have been saying there's 1.5 million each year. Now the FBI says that isn't true. Where does the truth lie?
The truth is very basic. We do not know. For anyone to say that there's this many kids missing or there's only a few, we do not know. There is no data reporting system in this country for children. We do know there are a lot of runaways and throwaways and parental snatchings. I told the Congress that they should categorize the missing children and make a priority. Those kids that are criminally abducted are crucial that we have a priority because medical examiners told us in 2020 the life expectancy of that child is from 14 to 48 hours. If that child is thrown in with all kinds of missing kids that we have no numbers on, law enforcement's inundated. They can't move effectively. But if we have a criteria, we can.
Okay, Dr. Ken Wooden, my special guest today. We want to get into all these lures, but maybe you'd like to pick one right now.
Sure. One of the most effective lures used by people that know, members of the family and or strangers, is simply giving a kid some love and affection, or giving the kid a little bit of time, or playing with the child. And what we try to teach children, there's good love and there's bad love, and that nobody should ever invade the safety zone that their bathing suit will cover. Because if they do that, that is not good love. And they should tell their parents, they should tell teachers, they should tell their ministers, and they should tell the police.
But when it's an extended family member, which it very often is in these cases, that's even tougher for the kid to tell somebody.
But yet, no one has the right to invade the dignity of a child. Not Grandpop or not Uncle Louie or no one. And the child should know that very early. That their privacy is given to them by God. And it's a beautiful thing. And it should not be abused.
We're talking with Dr. Ken Wooden, an investigative reporter, founder of the National Coalition for Children's Justice, and a reporter for ABC and CBS and a number of newspapers around the country dealing with child murderers, missing children. We're going to continue talking about Satanistic and occult influence in America today with reference to ritualistic slayings, the Jonestown Massacre, and a number of other items you will not want to miss.
Bakersfield. Hi, Mark.
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. First, I'd like to say I really like your program.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. How old are you? You sound young.
Oh, yeah, I'm 13.
Well, that's pretty old.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how can you tell you have a friend and they're still in the occult, you know? They're all into this deep rock music and, you know, they got a lot of chains and just satanic charms or just hanging around their neck like the pentagram and the hexagram.
Yeah.
How can you tell?
So you're wanting to know when do you start taking it real seriously? How do you know if they're really seriously messed up in something?
Is it some kind of reaction or something?
Well, okay. Dr. Wooden, we also had a lady on the show here recently whose son committed suicide, and she found out later his heavy involvement in the occult, which she had not known. How seriously should parents take it when a child has a pentagram hanging around their neck or wants to stick up a Black Sabbath poster in the wall? Should they take it seriously from the very first indication, or how do you advise them to handle it?
Absolutely. I mean, that kid is telling their parents something, and if they're wearing that jewelry, putting up that type of poster, they better sit down and communicate with the child, because if they're doing that, then they're probably doing other things in their personal life. They're doing drugs. They're doing free sex. They're doing sadomasochism. They're worshiping the devil. And all those things is basic to the belief of Satanism. And the way to do it is let the kids know, hey, man, this is not a fad. I mean, you are being programmed into destruction. The good Lord gave you a beautiful mind, a beautiful soul, and you got to talk to them. You just can't casually watch a child destroy themselves.
It seems to me that there's a general overall ethic in our society, an insidious attitude that relates to this whole child abduction and murdering thing, that people are expendable to human gratification or to just people who don't care about them.
Well, I think we're seeing the decadent factor in work of the sexual revolution. You know, pleasure, do your thing. And for that guy to come to this country and expound on basic values that are anti-family, anti-national, anti-Christian, is pathetic. And to watch people line up and become members of that, there's very little difference between that and Jim Jones.
We had the privilege last evening of sitting down and watching the video cassette. It's a tremendous teaching cassette that you have. You alluded to it a little earlier, and we certainly want to give the address in a moment where people can get all this kind of information that your organization has available. But one of the things I found rather interesting was the little I'm hiding a quarter game that these type of people will play with kids. And in the 2020 thing, the reporter even interviewed a child murderer who had played that game. Tell us about it.
Well, one of the most effective lures with a child is play a game. You know, children love to play games. Bismarck once said, as long as you play with a child, you can do anything you want. Well, molesters know that. So they play hide the quarter. And at first, you know, they hide it in their hair or their top pocket. And then the child will hide the quarter in their hair. And then, of course, the thing is to put the quarter in private areas of your body so that you or the child will be reaching into those private areas. It is a key, if you will, to get into, you know, early sex and foreplay with a child.
That's really very tragic. On the line right now is another caller from Bakersfield. All of a sudden, Bakersfield's calling me. Lynn?
Hi. I just want to say that I really agree with what he's saying as far as exposing what's going on. You know, I heard him say something about instead of turning the music down, turn it up and listen to the words.
Yeah.
I think that's really important because I think that Christians too often tend to push it aside, you know, or not really know the true what's wrong with it. And I think that's really a big problem.
Are you aware of how bad this whole thing is with child abduction, molestation, and murdering? Have you been watching the reports in the newspapers and on TV?
Yes, in fact, we're right in the middle of kind of a controversy here in Bakersfield as far as Satanism being here. But the thing that I find kind of interesting is that it seems to be they're pointing fingers at Christian ministers here in town, and I'm not too up on it, so I don't know, you know, really what's going on as far as it's just been brought out to light in the past week and a half or 2 weeks.
I want to mention something that was brought up in that 2020 special about children. being made to chew pieces of other children that have been ritualistically murdered, eating human feces, drinking human blood. That's rather astounding to a lot of people to suggest that sort of thing would go on in this country.
Well, Bob, we heard that all over the country, not just California. We heard it in Nevada, we heard it in Nebraska, Georgia, all of that. And it's all part of a design to destroy the self-esteem of a person, to destroy family values, to destroy national values. It's the reverse of everything that we hold dear and precious, and it's being practiced all over the country. What we have to do is get law enforcement, one, to learn about it, two, to understand it, and three, to really act on it within our courts and within the prosecution of those crimes.
Gacy, who murdered all those kids in Chicago, dressing up as a clown, who will identify with important figures. It's one of the things you bring out in your videotape and in the booklet as well.
Sure. These people have a credibility factor. John Wayne Gacy had pictures taken with Rosalind Carter, with the mayor of Chicago, and they also use police badges, which is a very important lure, Bob. You can buy these police badges really very cheap from these sleazy detective magazines. You can buy them at flea markets. You can literally steal them off the police. And who wouldn't follow a badge? You know, we really have to teach our children and young women to question authority if someone just flashes a badge. I mean, take a look at that badge. If someone's going to flash a badge, it means you're going to be arrested. So why would someone flash a badge to you, young lady, or to your children, unless they want to take that child?
Well, I don't know what is I don't know what's going on with his hotline for Bakersfield. I mean, we got all these millions of people in these scores of cities across the country. Richard, Bakersfield's got the hotline today. I don't know what's going on out there, but go ahead.
Well, Bob, my name is Richard Lassiter, and I'm a deputy sheriff for the Kern County Sheriff's Office in California. Bob, recently our department has uncovered an investigation that is leading into the satanic ritualistic murders and molestations. And that's probably why you're receiving a lot of calls from the Bakersfield area.
I think so. People that really have this thing on their minds. What are you able to tell us about this situation that is not, private information?
Well, okay, I really can't go into a lot of details. First of all, I'm not directly involved in this investigation, so I don't have a lot of those details. But I do know that the Sheriff Department is really getting a lot of flack from the local news media. And basically what that flack centers around is they are accusing the Sheriff's Department of coercing the children into fabricating these stories.
Now, this is the same thing that happened with the Martin School down in Southern California. After a while, it seems like it's the authorities who are on the defensive.
Well, that's primarily the position that the news media has put us into because of their innuendos and almost slanderous remarks, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And really, Bob, quite honestly, the reason why I'm calling is I would like, if it's permissible, to enlist the Christians throughout the country who are able to listen to your program to pray the blood of Jesus Christ over those officers.
I think that would be just super. In fact, I'd like to stop and do it right now. Before I do that, can you tell me, how many victims have they uncovered out there in Bakersfield?
Bob, I don't have an exact figure on that. It's several, and I could be way on left field on this figure, but it could be around 40 to 60, somewhere in that ballpark figure.
And is this an organized type of a group, or were these random acts? What is the indication at this early point?
It appears it's probably an organized group. It seems very well organized.
All right. Just before we stop and have a word of prayer, Richard, about this, Dr. Wooden, I think this is just great to have the country be able to join together to pray that God will give guidance and wisdom to these police officers. You have any comments about this sort of thing before we pray?
I'm curious to know if they found any bodies. I'm also curious to know if the children gave any type of leads or information that would not be within their realm of experience. For example, did they talk about funeral parlors? Did they talk about graveyards? Did they talk about crematories? And also, I would like to volunteer, not as a 2020 reporter, but as a concerned citizen and Christian. I would like to volunteer any help that I can give them in that investigation, because I've been doing this for over 10 years now.
I think that's really great. Don't you, Richard?
Yes, I certainly do.
Can you just quickly respond to the two questions that he asked in terms of the children? Did they talk anything about death-oriented type of language?
As I understand it, yes, they do. They have described where they have been, I'll say, made to or forced to commit actual murders themselves. And as to the issue of cremation, as I understand it, too, that they have seen cremations and been a part of in some facet of the cremation. And no, Bob, there has not been any bodies found.
So it's just what the children at this point are saying, and they haven't been able to actually uncover any skeletons yet?
Not that I'm aware of, that's correct.
All right, we want to have a word of prayer here, and then we're going to get the two of you gentlemen together, and I appreciate Dr. Wooden assisting this, and I think it's just great that through the medium of this program, we're able to get these gentlemen together, and right now we're able to get all of America together. And I just want the members of America's largest live prayer family just to stop for a moment, whatever you are doing. Would you do that if it's at all possible? And it may even mean pulling your car to the side of the road. But I want you just to stop and agree together with me in prayer. And I know that Richard and Ken Wooden will pray with us as well. We reach out now, Lord, to Ken up there in Chicago and Richard out there in Bakersfield and hundreds and thousands of millions of people all across America right now. And we agree together that the tide of evil that would destroy our children and tear apart the fabric of this society will be arrested by the intervention of our law enforcement officers, by the good assistance of people like Dr. Wooden, and by the mercy and grace of God, and by the power of the Holy Spirit. And we know, God, that when the police become involved in investigating something like this, that Satan raises up a force against them, that the accuser of the brethren, as he is called in Scripture, will immediately begin to seek to discredit it, lest his evil work be uncovered. And we pray for those officers out there in the Kern County area right now, that your blood and protection and your angelic host will stand about them. And we just ask in the name of Jesus Christ that truth shall prevail. And I pray, God, your continued blessing upon Ken Wooden and whatever assistance he can give these gentlemen and whatever assistance he can provide elsewhere across the country. I know that Satan, Lord, must be very angry at what Ken is doing, and I just ask you to protect him, to keep your hand upon him, and to continue to give him wisdom to uncover the evil work of Satan and his human representatives who, under his control, seek to destroy young lives. Now we commit this to you, God. And we pray that for Richard and the other police officers, there will be grace and courage to continue forth in this effort. We ask these things in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Richard, we're going to keep America praying for you and stay in touch with us and let us know what's going on out there.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. God bless you now.
Yeah, listen, stay right there. I want to put you on hold so we can get you and Dr. Wooden together in this thing. Well, I don't know about you, but I just think this is tremendous. And, hey, listen, that is why God has raised up this program for moments like this, so that you and I together can be part of something that can turn in a constructive, positive way the tide of evil around in this country. Why did you become involved in something like this? I'm sure it involves a tremendous personal commitment on your part to be involved in this struggle for the lives of children.
Well, Bob, I'm a father of 4 children and recently a grandfather, and I have interviewed in the last 10 years hundreds of parents whose children were murdered. And I wanted to do something, and I had the idea that if I could interview the killers, I would learn, how they would lure the children. And I also came across in my investigative work how organized molesters are. For example, I have a book right here, sells for $1.60 by the molesters, and it's called How to Have Sex with Children. It's the most descriptive book I've ever seen. How to use parents to get these molesters other children. The type of lubricants to use, how to introduce little kids to oral sex, how not to hurt little girls during sex at first. I mean, it is the most incredible document. I've also discovered that in 37 different states in the last decade, the age of having sex with children, it has been lowered. And I've also discovered they are so organized that they now have national conventions, molesters, where they had pictures taken behind banners. They're coming out of the closet.
Wait a minute, national conventions of child molesters?
Absolutely. I have a picture of the North American Boy Lovers Association behind their banner in Los Angeles. the Rene Goyon Society held a press conference about anal sex, and they said after 10 years of research, they've now come to the conclusion that a child 4 years old can take an adult penis.
Oh, man, that is absolutely incredible. It's frightening, and I'm so glad that you're with us today to really get this information out to the public. Bob in Baton Rouge?
Yes, sir. I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
I was reading the newspaper today, and I seen where a lady had dropped her baby. Well, she had threw her baby down on the concrete, and I was just wondering if that had anything to do with rock and roll. You think?
Well, who knows what it had anything to do with it? She's just a sick woman.
Yeah.
She just dropped her baby on the concrete?
They said it was a 30-year-old woman that she had gotten into an argument with her family, and she threw her 5-month-old son down on the concrete floor. And I was just curious if that rock and roll music, the things that it brings out,
let me just comment on that, because I think probably we can't say that there's a direct cause and effect as such, but certainly the type of music that this mother being listening to, the drugs she may have been involved in, just a general kind of disrespect, sitting down watching MTV and seeing violence against other individuals so casually, could certainly precipitate that type of thing. Dr. Wooden, I want you to comment just briefly on one of the child lures you bring out that was really fascinating to me, and I thought I was fairly knowledgeable in this area, but this is one that kind of fooled me, and that's the emergency trick.
Yes, it's a very effective lure where they will see a kid coming home from school, and by the way, they target a kid in the morning, and they go after him in the afternoon. They look for a loner type, and they'll say to a kid, quickly get in the car, your daddy had a heart attack, or your home is on fire and your mommy sent me to pick you up. Most of us would have a hard time with an emergency. A kid who's so dependent on the family, my God, they're really hurting. So it's designed to upset the kid, worry the kid, and the kid will drop all their safeguards and get in that car. And and I know they won't even let a child into a hospital if someone is ill. So we have to let our children know that, not to fall for that trick.
You saw some really incredible things. I have a copy of your book where you tell about some of the things that were done, almost too horrible to mention to those children. It's I suppose the average person out there shudders. They can't imagine a mind so twisted.
Well, Bob, I'll tell you, after writing that book, and I wrote it for the American public because it's a blueprint how a cult operates. And it was an education for me because when I started looking into the occult, I knew because of the Jonestown experience. And that little book, The Children of Jonestown, should be required reading for anybody in law enforcement because, again, it's a blueprint of how the occult works, how they use politicians, how they destroy families, how they destroy religious values. This is an awful thing to tell you, but I'm going to share it with your listeners. Some of the people that survived Jonestown, one of the most important things that they were so happy to get back to in this country was to use toilet paper. And we said, well, why is that so important? He said, because Jim Jones made us use the Bible.
Oh, my word.
They destroy values that hold society together. And I have found in my work, that the Bible is desecrated like that all across this country now.
Jan, Belgrade, Montana.
I'd like to ask you to pray for my family. We've been going through a great deal of difficulty, and my husband and I are separated at this time, and he's not a Christian. He's a biker. And my oldest daughter, who is developmentally delayed, has been having some serious problems. She was sexually abused by who we don't know.
When did this happen to your daughter?
Sometime last year, in the early part of the year. We haven't been able to pin it down.
Do you have any idea who molested her?
No. My husband was blamed for it, and we know that he didn't do it because he wasn't around at that particular time. It's just been a really mixed-up mess, and I know that God's going to bring some good out of it. He takes what Satan means for bad and turns it to good, and I trust him to do that.
Well, God has a way of doing that, Jan. You are in our prayers.
More about today's topic.
And they were going to kill me. And for 4 years, I didn't know whether I was going to live or die.
Oh, my word. How old was he at the time?
Was 5.5.
Why did they do it? Was it the type of thing I was talking about a moment ago, just a parent lacking coping skills who is out of control, or was it more serious?
They're involved in a satanic cult.
Well, why did they beat him?
My father was sexually abusing him, and he wouldn't stop talking about it. And he killed him. My mother killed my brother. And it's just, I can't deal with it.
Have you ever talked about it much to anybody?
My parents are very clever. They've gotten away with a lot of things. They're involved in a child sex ring. And I think that they have probably killed other children, too.
Have you ever considered going to the authorities and discussing this with them?
In this particular child sex ring?
Yes. Have you gone to the authorities?
Yes, I have.
Are they trying to do something to crack the thing?
Well, they're not doing a very good job.
Do you still ever see your parents?
No, I don't. And my parents put me in a child pornography film when I was 10. And I guess I sort of developed a multiple personality. And I gave birth to my daughter. And I went to Child Protective Services when she was 18 months old and got into parenting classes. But what I found out is that I had been so horribly abused that I was really afraid of passing this on. And so I put her in a foster home when she was 2.5.
In other words, you were afraid you were going to batter her.
Yeah, I was afraid that I was going to pass on to her what my parents had done to me because I never got any treatment. And
are you seeing any type of therapist, Christian counselor, or anyone who's helping you to deal with the memories of what you went through?
Yeah, I'm dealing with Child Sexual Abuse Anonymous in Victoria, Canada. And it's a Christian. There are Christian people involved in it. And
but it's obvious, Susan, even hearing you talk now, that your voice kind of breaks a little bit. It's hard for you still to bring back those memories.
Well, yes, it is. It's terrifying.
Where's your little daughter now?
She's with her father.
And what's your spiritual situation?
Well, I'm a Christian, and I've been reading the Bible,
And your ex-husband?
He's a Christian, too.
So you feel that your daughter is getting the right kind of care?
I think so.
Well, I tell you, hearing everything you've been through and what you've had to suffer, it's just beautiful to know that you have found the Lord, because someone like you could have been a very dangerous person wanting to get back at society and everyone else for what was done to you. And I'm just thrilled to know that the grace of God has stepped in and broken that cycle of revenge in your life.
Well, I just hope that my parents are brought to justice.
Well, I would hope they would, too. And wherever they are and whoever they are, we just want to get this prayer family praying that a halt will be brought to their activities before they destroy the lives of other children, Susan. I really thank you for calling and sharing that story today. I know how very difficult it must be for you to talk about this type of thing, but one of the reasons I believe God has raised up this ministry in the radio is to let people know what's going on in our real world. For too long, Christians have put their heads in the sand, and the devil has run roughshod over people's lives. But no more. We're going to find out what's going on, and we're going to pray and do what we can to turn things like this around, Susan.
Well, I wish that Christians would have helped me when I was a child. They saw me being tortured.
And they didn't do anything?
They do a thing. They just buried their head in the sand, like you said.
Walt?
I just wanted to share with you, Bob. I was abused when I was a child by my father. I can't remember a day, except maybe when I was real young, until I ran away from home, that I wasn't physically abused.
What was his favorite technique? Or how did he normally react? Was he just slapping you around, or?
No, he'd slap me around. He'd beat me with things. He'd emotionally abuse me, verbally, you know.
What went through your mind as a young child when you knew you didn't have it coming?
Well, I didn't have any sense of self-worth. I can see it now. I didn't know what was going on then. Suicide at probably the age of 9.
You were thinking about killing yourself at 9?
Yeah, right close in there. I ran away from home when I was 13. And I turned 14 this summer. I ran away from home.
What difference has the Lord made in your life? Has he been able to help bring healing to all of this hurt?
Well, yes, it has. problems I still have. I'm 30 to physically abuse my children. When I first got married, I seen that.
You got it under control now?
Man, I do. I couldn't ever have done it without the Lord's help.
I believe that. Dr. Wooden, we're going to be back with you in the second hour in just a moment. I know it's going to be an exciting time together. I just want you to know I appreciate your being with us.
Well, Bob, thank you for the opportunity to pass on this information to your listeners.
Expert and authority in the areas of child molestation, child murderers, and child abduction, and we're very grateful that he could be with us today, and we have had an absolutely fascinating time talking about Jonestown, the occult influence in child abduction, and as well discussing with him what's going on in the area of child molestation. He's got a booklet that his organization's produced called Child Lures. We've been talking about some of those lures. An old line, don't take candy from strangers. Update is Dr. Wooden. What are some of the new techniques that child abductors and murderers are using?
Well, that is the old bribery lure, and in addition to candy, what they're now offering kids, Cabbage Patch dolls, headsets. They're offering them a roll of quarters so they can go and play the video games. And what we tell children, that you don't get something for nothing. People will offer those things because they want something from them. They want to be able to grab them and take them in a car. And if someone's offering them something, they should tell, again, their parents, their teacher, their minister, or the police.
Now, is there any particular age group that's a primary target for abduction, molestation, and murdering?
That's a great question, Bob, and thank you for asking it. Yes, the prime age, children between the ages of 11, from 10 to 12, both boys and girls. And I went to the experts. When I found, that was a prime target, 56%. I said to them, why, 57%, why are you guys into that certain age group? And their answer was universal, and it was fascinating. They said, that's the age when a child enters puberty. We want to turn them on sexually. We want them fresh and young. And it's very revealing because, we're thinking about very little kids and protecting them. And when our kids, especially boys are 11 and 12, they're kind of macho. This is the most critical time to keep an eye on them.
Okay, Dr. Ken Wooden, my special guest today. State investigative reporter and founder of the National Coalition for Children's Justice, is my special guest today. He's the author of the book, The Children of Jonestown by McGraw-Hill, exploring the tragedy of the 276 children murdered near Georgetown, Guyana. As I mentioned during the first hour, Dr. Wooden also produced the 2020 television special on the subject of Satanism that many of you may have seen this past May 16. The National Coalition for Children's Justice has printed a helpful guide to prevent childhood abduction entitled Childhood Lures. In the next hour, you'll find out how you can get a copy and how you can warn your children about the dangers of being abducted. Dr. Wooden has written, quote, heightened sexual fervor and tempo in movies and television is commonplace, and the sensual hype in advertising has become normal and expected. More and more troubled and weak-willed adults are pushed beyond their ability to contain abnormal sex drives, leaving children as prime targets for molestation and murder. Our topic is child murderers, molesters, and abductors. What they do, how they do it, and what you can do to stop it. A special prayer request from one of our Canadian listeners in Nanaimo, BC. A missing child. The father involved in a cult. I'm sure you find this thing many, many times as you travel across the country, Dr. Wooden. If with everything you've seen and you've encountered, has there been any particular instance that's been abnormally shocking to you?
Well, yes. The perversion of the occult against little children. Like we have heard that they molested babies in incubators in hospitals. We have heard that children that are deformed are prime targets. And at first, I didn't believe it. And I don't fault law enforcement that much because, if I didn't believe it for a couple of years, how can I be critical of them? But then I started to study the occult. And I started to study the basis of Satanism, and it's the reverse of Christian beliefs. And therefore, if they do something like to molest a child in an incubator in a hospital, that increases their power. That increases the satisfaction of Satan. Therefore, those things are very real because, again, it's a belief system that they believe in, and it's a power thing. And, of course, it's awful, it's perverse, it's evil. It did shock me because I have never, ever experienced, nor have I looked at evil in the eye like I have in this last year.
When I saw the 2020 television special, I must admit, when that thing was finished, I turned to my wife and said, I cannot believe that was shown on network television. I was really taken back. I was surprised. I mean, very often when network television does something like that, exposing Satanism, the occult, whatever, they come at it almost apologetically, but they really did not. 2020, I commend them for it. They laid it right out there, the seriousness of it, and included many of the warnings, which I'm sure your investigative reporting helped to endorse. Were you surprised that 2020 was that upfront about the whole thing without peddling it just a little?
Well, Bob, let me first tell you that I work for a really special guy named Bob Weston, who has a lot of guts, and he's a hell of a journalist. And I also work with a co-producer, Peter Kuhnhart, who's wonderful, and Tom Gerald, our correspondent. We're all hard news people. They gave me a chance to look at children's issues 2 years ago, and I've given them some very good programs. And I'm not speaking for 2020 now, but I do admire their integrity, I admire their guts, and we had a good, hard news story, and we documented what we had. We only showed about 5%. I mean, we have a lot more. We documented what we had and let the chips fall where they may. And it's amazing how law enforcement, I think what we did, Bob, we legitimatized that as an issue in this country, and that was my objective.
Now, before we take a break, I understand from looking at your child lures outline that witchcraft and Satanism is actually being used as a lure by abductors.
Incredible lure. For example, I say to little children, how many of you like Halloween? And every hand goes up, And I said, well, what if somebody has you play Halloween every day? Is that good or bad? And they look at me kind of funny. Of course, it's a fascinating lure. Adults are being lured into it. It's an amazing lure. And we really got to ask our children tough questions if they start drawing pentagrams, if they start drawing certain things that are just very characteristic of the occult, because they are being recruited in some areas of the country.
Dr. Ken Wooden, my guest, and one of the things I think is rather fascinating, as I've noticed just listening in the last couple hours, if you listeners out there were to hear some televangelist or radio personality who is a well-known preacher say these types of things, and we have a lot of you listening out there who are very skeptical, agnostics, atheists, and listen, I know you're there, you call me. You would probably say, come on now, it's just one of those radio preachers or some other radio or television evangelist. You are listening to an investigative reporter for some of the top newspapers and television networks in the country. I hope you are paying heed to what this man is saying. It is a serious issue. We're going to continue talking about the satanic influence in child molestation and murdering. We're going to give you some helpful guidelines on how you can prevent your children from perhaps falling prey to one of these insidious individuals.
The government wanted to implement some computer modules or computer chips into children so that either when the children were found, if they weren't recognizable, or where the mother could module and close in on them, where their whereabouts were. Now, I wonder if this computer chip's going to be in their right hand or their forehead. And another thing...
Okay, hang on for a minute. Are you saying you're concerned about the invasion of privacy in this regard?
No, just the old aspect of the deceiver, trying, taking all the bad things that are in the world, turning them around and using them as.
Okay, you're saying kind of the Antichrist type thing, controlling people. Okay, what else?
Okay, also, some people would say, okay, why would Satan want to have all this stuff released? About all these child molesters being, of Satan and everything. But I think that is just another act of Satan, where people would tend to maybe turn towards the goodness that is being, the goodness in the New Age movement.
Okay, I want to get Dr. Wooden to comment on this. There's 2 interesting points he's raised here, and I'd like you to comment on them, Ken. First of all, how do you feel about the fingerprinting, the implanting of computer chips and that sort of thing? Are there going to be unreasonable invasions of privacy to solve a big problem?
No, I don't think so, if it is done right. The molesters are using the computers now. There's legislation to curb their use of the computer to molest children. They're doing it, pure and simple. As for fingerprinting, Bob, I used to classify fingerprints for the New Jersey State Police, and I even called a guy who was wanted for murder before I went to college. I'm against the wholesale fingerprinting of children because it's not being done right. It's being done with a lot of hype, and it's after the fact. What good is it to have a child, to have the fingerprints of a child once they're abducted? It doesn't help you find the child because if it's not done right, you can't classify them, number one. Number two, I know a case where a kid was abducted. They had fingerprints, but the pimp changed her name and gave her a false ID, and no one bothered to look at the new name and the fingerprint.
Okay, let's talk just for a moment, Ken, about this matter of the fascination of evil. You brought up an interesting point, you know, that you would think that Satan would not want all this information out, but to a certain extent, there seems to be an attraction to the seamier side of life. Is there not? Did you find this in your investigations?
Sure, I understand his question. Is he saying that this information shouldn't be brought out because it's fascinating and therefore evil?
I'm not sure where he's really coming from. He's not on the line now, but I think he's saying that maybe the devil doesn't mind everybody knowing what's going on. How do you feel about that? Are some people going to be attracted because they hear that 75 people were murdered in Toledo and ritualistically slain?
I think that's poppycock. Of course, those people are going to be turned on to anything. We have to root out a cancer. You know, if you have a cavity in your tooth, you go to the dentist, right, to save the tooth. We have to root that out. There are some people say to me, why do you give the lures out? The molesters will learn from them and use them. I give the lures out to the children so that they know how to cope with the molesters. The molesters know how to get those children. There were 238 molesters in a treatment program in New York. Before they were arrested, they averaged 80 children each. They molested 16,233 kids. I think it's time that we give children some basic defense. You know, in football, you don't win a game by having just a good defense. You have an offense and a defense. And I want to give children the defense.
We're listening to Ken Wooden, my special guest today, and Dave is on the line back there in Toledo, Ohio. Dave?
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Just real great. I'm very grateful for this program today because I think it's awakening a lot of people to something that they're not totally familiar with, the sinister dimensions of it.
I know. I wish there was a lot of this could be heard more in Toledo, but you're only on the first hour there. And Mr. Wooden, are you familiar with Mr. Griffiths from the Tiffin Police Department?
Okay, we talked about the Toledo murders a little earlier. Just how familiar are you with that, Ken?
Very, very, very much. We interviewed Dale Griffiths. He had the most extensive file that I've ever seen, and I'm in touch with the sheriff's office out there, and they asked me if I would help them, and we are going to help them. I am going to help them if I can.
Okay, Dave, question further?
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is he was involved in helping Sheriff Telb find looking for the site. I don't believe they found the site as of yet. If they have, I don't know. I haven't heard it. Have they?
Well, I don't know myself. They were supposed to. Where did the speculation of the 75 people ritualistic slaying come from?
No, but they have not found any bodies to date.
No bodies to date. Okay. Anything else, Dave, along this line of the story?
Yeah. Well, they covered the story on, of course, all the three television networks were down there, local news, pounding on them. And then they were starting to more or less slap these guys in the face. Like one township trustee came down and said, "You're ruining my township by doing this digging. You're making people upset that you're here." What are people more upset for? Trying to stop it or allowing it to go and turning their heads?
Boy, that's a good question, Ken.
Well, I don't think a lot of people in this country, I don't think they have the guts, I don't think they have the old-fashioned grit to really face some of the problems. I mean, it's a basic cancer on the soul of our country, and you don't solve cancer by ignoring it.
That's with a video cassette, which I strongly encourage people, we'll give you the address in a moment, to get a hold of to show in their churches before parent-teachers associations and any school teachers, administrators, principals, and so on out there. I encourage you to get a copy of it and show it to your communities. One of the points you do bring out in there is use a code word. Elaborate on it a little bit.
Well, a code word is very important because, an adult can be very engaging, an adult can be very charming, and they can lure a child into the car. We have a code word with our son, and believe me, unless he hears that code word, he's not going to get in. One other thing, Bob, they can be so engaging that they'll make believe they're hard of hearing or they'll ask for directions. I've told my son, and I've told everyone on the tape, tell your children I mean to be courteous and all that, but if somebody wants directions to take 2 giant steps backwards and be ready to run the opposite direction.
Now, excuse me, you literally mean take 2 steps. You illustrate that in the film. You don't mean just kind of psychologically do it, back off.
2 big steps, because in the film, I show how easy it is to grab a child. And when you grab a child and pull him, the weight of the child will help you to lift the child into your car. And by the way, most of these people will use a blue car and a 2-door sedan. The reason being, it's hard to get out of a 2-door sedan, and a blue car resembles a police car. So, you know, we really have to alert our children and give them some very basic survival things.
Is there any particular time of a day a parent needs to be concerned about?
Yes, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I told the chiefs of police in Pennsylvania the most important time is from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. That's when they go after most of the children. You see, Bob, they target the kid in the morning. They look for a kid who takes the shortcuts out of sight. They look for a kid who's a loner in the playground. They look for a little kid who's a little unkept or maybe smoking cigarettes. That's the kid they target on the way home from school. The chiefs of police in Pennsylvania are so happy because they're going to increase their patrols around schools later in the afternoon.
Okay, Mike's on the line right here in Denver. Mike?
Yeah. I just wanted to comment. I'm really enjoying the program. I was reading in the Sunday Denver Post on May 12th. It said the truth about missing kids. It's right on the headlines. And it said abductions in Colorado actually rare.
Rare?
Officials believe that only a handful happen in the state each year.
Okay, we'll get back in just a moment. We'll have Dr. Wooden comment on that. And to the extent of, there's a lot of controversy going on today as to what percentage of the missing children are really missing and so on. We had some of the people from the SLAM organization on a little over a year ago, some of the local and the national people. They didn't seem to indicate that's true. What's going on here with these headlines about missing children, abduction, and the conflicting reports?
Well, the media is just being very irresponsible. I'm embarrassed. As a member of the media, I'm embarrassed that a newspaper like that would write an article that is so uninformed and is so stupid. Now, granted, the issue has been hyped by some self-interest groups where they clump parental abduction cases into criminally abducted. But we did a program on 2020 called They're Murdering Our Children. We zeroed in on some children that were, quote, not missing children. They were runaways. Well, when they found the skeletal remains and when they found out that they were murdered, they were quietly removed as runaways. They were no longer missing. They're in cemeteries now. The point being is that we don't know how many are missing. When a child is thought to be a runaway, they find the skeletal remains. We know where they are now, so they're no longer missing. The other point I want to make is this. An abduction of a child. Someone who picks up your child and takes it to the backwoods or a back bedroom for a half hour or a half a day, that kid is an abducted child. That kid has been criminally assaulted. And for the newspaper to say that's not happening in Colorado is so irresponsible, because I know as a reporter all across this country, kids are being sexually molested and abducted for a half hour, a half a day. Every state is telling me that there is an increase in sexual molestation and exploitation of children.
Okay, excuse me. Chuck's on the line in Elk Grove, California. Chuck?
Yes.
Or Chick?
Yes.
Got it right that time.
Well, first of all, I want to talk to you about a program you had on last week or weekend after, something like that. It was about Lamaze, and you were, I guess your gals you had on with you was claiming that Lamaze was part of their cult. And I went through Lamaze with my last child, and my child weighed about 10.5 pounds, and I went full natural birth. I don't believe whatsoever that it has to do with their cult.
Well, I think maybe you misunderstood the intent of what was said at that particular point in time. I don't know that there was an accusation that it was actually of the occult. There were some suggestions that various types of visualization and self-hypnotic processes that some natural birth advocates teach can one can come from an occultic frame of reference, but I don't think there was a direct attack on Lamaze per se. That was not the intent, and I'd like to clear up that misunderstanding.
Oh, I see. That's why you didn't know, because I thought it was more or less trying to inform pregnant women not to...
No. We can lay that one to rest and go on. What else?
Okay. Also, as far as rock and roll goes, I used to be, an avid rock and roll listener until Van Halen's Running with the Devil came out.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and when that came out, then I really started stopping and looking and listening to what I was really participating into.
Listen, anybody knows anything about what David Lee Roth's into knows that guy is running with the devil. That's the sad part about it. Sometimes there's more honesty than nothing else. When Twisted Sister sings to their audiences, you're going to burn in hell, the tragedy is that some of those kids will, because their heads are all twisted in their music. What about the child molestation thing, Chick?
Well, the child molestation thing is, I have a child who has been molested. He was approximately a year old. And what I'd like to say is there is really no justice. They claim that there was nothing they could do because he was not old enough to state what happened. And even though I witnessed it, I happened to walk into the room, there was nothing that could be done.
Now, who did it?
My nephew.
Your nephew did it? You walked into the room, you tried to prosecute?
Well, what happened is I took him down to the hospital to make sure there was no, damage done, and they informed me that it was, that it's a law, that the police was tested and everything, and they told me that, really, that, because the baby wasn't old enough to say what actually happened, that there was nothing that could be done.
I'd like to get your comments on this, Ken.
Well, that's pretty weird because I know of teenagers that have been arrested where there's a credible witness, and if she, in fact, did see it, and I believe she did, sometimes you really have to pursue law enforcement to do their thing. And I would suggest to her to really pursue it, because if that kid did it at age 14, you know he's doing it at 15, at 20, at 21, or whatever age he is now. And to pursue it, that's to believe.
Okay, Ken Wooden, my special guest today.
I mean, Dr. Wooden, on the 20-minute clip that he did, but I was a little disappointed in the way that he interviewed Mike Warnke, and I was really glad to see that, but the method that Mike Warnke escaped from Satanism wasn't really brought out. And I wanted to ask him one question. Isn't it in the public's best interest, whether or not they believe that they know that Jesus' blood is the escape from Satanism?
Okay, what about the approach in 2020? We understand this was a secular journalistic approach. Were you not at liberty or whatever to present the alternative of saying turning your life over to God is one way to get out of this? It did leave people kind of hanging.
Well, I'm sure it did, but you got to remember, Bob, that we are a secular, network, and we were doing a news program. We were not doing a religious program, and we wanted to report on incredible allegations. Mike was a very good interview, but in television you don't have endless time. You have 2 hours. I envy you, Bob, but we had to pack all that together in 23 minutes, and you do lose some things when you do that.
Wendy listens to us in Bakersfield. Wendy, we've had a lot of callers in Bakersfield. This is a very hot item out there right now.
It really is, and I just want to thank Dr. Wooden for being willing to help us out here. And I want to acknowledge that this is the Lord's work, too, that there's been a lot of prayer about this, and I think that the fact that it's getting attention on your program today is because the Lord has his hand in this.
I believe that, and we're just praying that Ken Wooden will be able to be a big help to some of the law enforcement officers out there. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to ask Dr. Wooden what he thought a community of Christians could do. We've been praying about it, and many of us here have been encouraged to write to the sheriff and encourage his department to continue because they really are under a lot of attack.
Okay, any particular suggestions you might share with this lady and others when they hear about something in their community, just as a public voice?
I would urge them to urge their neighbors and friends, if they have children that were abused, not to be ashamed, not to cover up, and to come forward, and not to lead their children, but to have people that are trained in law enforcement to interview those kids. In order to get convictions, it's like crocheting something. You need a lot of separate threads, and then you tie it together. And if we're going to get any convictions down there or anything, we really need the threads of evidence. And don't worry about the media. I mean, when I hear the media is critical on someone like that, in a sense, the media really has to do their job. And part of their job is being a little critical, and that's something we have to live with. People accuse me of being like that at times. But the truth will come out. I believe these crimes are occurring, and I believe they're so bizarre that we don't want to face them. Encourage your people to talk. Encourage your people to come forward. And most important, teach your children prevention, because after those kids are subject to those types of crimes, you have a lifelong struggle of rebuilding your childhood, your children's childhood.
In your booklet, Child Lures, there's some helpful information about the age groups, even what color a car to look out for. What about sex? Male, female, which is more likely to be abducted?
Well, on the national average, Bob, it's females 4 to 1. But in the study that we did, a study that was done with 7 unsolved murders up in Michigan, it was revealed it was a 50-50%. Therefore, we have to talk to our little boys, too. We have to talk to our young men. We have to say, hey, you are a possible victim. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a week ago, 3 boys, age 15, 2 were 15, 1 was 17, were criminally abducted on a major street corner, taken in the woods. They were forced to do sex. They were forced to be sodomized. Awful. These were young men in a major city, in a downtown section. We have to talk to our children.
12, 13, and then not so much after that by my stepdad. And I had run away from home a couple times during that point. It wouldn't be for days or anything, but it would be for hours. And I had been picked up by the police, and I had told them what was going on. And I remember going to the police department and them calling my stepdad, and my stepdad coming and picking me up, and me telling the police, I don't want to go home with him.
And they sent you home with him?
Sent me home with him.
Do you think that those were less enlightened days than today, where the issue of abuse and all that kind of thing is more prevalent in the public mind?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a lot different now than it was, say, 10 years ago.
What has it done to you as a person?
Well, I'm pretty good with them. My husband says I'm really short-tempered to a point. He says it takes a long time for me to get angry. I've been told I keep it all inside. So.
But you're not having to deal with any potential of physically abusing them?
No problem there. Maybe overprotection would probably be.
Sounds like they're tearing the house down. You better go protect your house, Debbie. Irene is in Vancouver.
Yes, Bob. I was beaten with a belt and punched in the stomach and raped at the age of 5 by my father.
Oh.
I lived with that for the next 9 years. He consistently raped and beat me any time of the day or night. And it was like I lived in a prison. I couldn't tell anyone about what had been happening because my father told me if I told anyone, he would kill me. Inside of myself, I would just fight and scream until one night I went in the kitchen and I took a knife out of the drawer in the kitchen. And I was going upstairs in the night. I was going to stab my father.
Oh.
But then somehow I realized that this wasn't the answer. And the next day I told my mother what was going on, and my father denied everything and said that I had probably been having an affair with a boy or something like that.
And blaming him.
Right, instead of saying he had anything to do with it. So at that point it was either myself or my father would have to leave home. I realized that.
Well, how does somebody who's been beaten and raped by their father and they wanted to take a knife and kill him ever get life together again?
I have to say it's only been through the power of Jesus Christ. He says in his word, if the Son sets you free, then indeed you shall be free.
Rose in Ohio?
How are you?
Fine.
I'm waiting for an hour. I said, I'll get eventually.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Listen, I want to let you know, I'm a social worker here in Columbus, and I work with abuse and neglected children. And I see the residual effects of the abuse. And I wanted to let the parents know, and I think Edward represents a multitude of the parents who have abusive children across the nation. If they begin to make the first step
first of repentance and recognizing the problem.
Speak up just a little bit. Okay, you said they've got to recognize the problem is the first step, and then where do they go from there?
Repent and really seek God and ask for salvation. That's the first step. I think today the parents have received almost like free therapy because truly Christ is the answer. And once that happens, I really feel that things can be better for the parent and child at home.
What are some of the cases that you've seen?
I've seen kids who have been abused with maybe 80% of burns, parents placing children in hot water for little or no reasons. I've seen sexual abuse. Today I was dealing with a child who is deaf as a result of chronic neglect. And now he's going to be adopted, and we're placing him with deaf parents.
Now, that's beautiful. Tell me how you, as a person dealing in social work like that, avoid feeling anger. How can you feel compassion toward these parents knowing there's a reason they did this?
Being saved helps a whole lot, Bob.
I'll go along with that.
I pray for my children. I pray for my parents. I never got angry at them. It's been frustrating. I've done this for over 6 years, and it's not easy. It's a long, tedious process.
But when you take some of these children away from their parents, do you get this kind of reaction that I mentioned earlier in the program, like, how dare you take my kid from me? I know how to look after my kid better than anybody.
I got so much in that, and you just deal with it. And a lot of times I just say to the parents, you really need help. This child is innocent. This child is a victim, and he does not need to suffer from this type of environment.
It's very beautiful to hear from someone such as you who is such a vibrant believer in social work, because I think so often we have a caricature of people in social work who are generally treating this problem from such a non-Christian humanistic standpoint. It's frustrating to believers to hear how they're intervening.
Right. I take it from a Christian standpoint, and I really feel that although I work primarily in adoptions now, I really feel that it is the Lord's will if the parent could not get themselves together, could not be saved, did not want to be saved, then it is our responsibility to take care of these children and place them in good homes where they're not going to suffer from that abuse, because at one point or another it has to stop.
It does. And Rose, I'm so grateful to the Lord there are people like you who are trying to do what they can to make it stop.
I'd like to know, why do these Satanists become involved and stay with it? Is it for spiritual or material or whatever?
Good question. People who get involved in this type of thing, what is their lure that keeps them abducting children, sacrificing them, murdering, and going on like this?
That is a superb question. What I've come to the conclusion is this, that there are those that have a twisted belief system and they want to satisfy their pleasures. But there are others that are literally tricked into it for free sex and pleasure and this and that. And then, Bob, they are filmed and then extorted. If I had, say, a prominent lawyer or a banker who was, wanted to have a little fun on the side discreetly, it brought into an orgy. And then, believe me, you own that person forever. And part of the whole satanic thing, as Mike Warnke would tell you, is to have obtained power. And what a power over the life of a very prominent person.
Yeah, okay. Anything else, Brent?
Yes, one more thing. I missed the program on 2020, and I was wondering, will it be aired again?
Yeah, is there any possibility that might be on the air again, Dr. Wooden? It was an excellent special showing the occult influence and Satanist influence in a number of areas, from rock music to murder.
Thank you, Bob, and I appreciate the comments. Unfortunately, we have a policy of no reruns. We do all new material. I would suggest that your listener write to 2020 for the transcript, and that would be ABC News 2020, 157 Columbus Avenue, New York, 123. The program aired on May 16th, called Devil Worshippers.
Okay, it was a very excellent program. I'm on the road a lot, or I'm here involved in the studio a lot. I don't get to watch much television and get those kind of programs, but I happened to catch that one, and I'm so grateful for the fact I did, because it was super. Bonnie is in Butte, Montana.
Yeah, a couple of questions for Dr. Wooden.
Okay, make them as brief as possible. We're almost out of time. We want to be sure we get to you.
Okay. Kids in our youth group here that have been involved in Satanism. And I was wondering if he could suggest any reading material for myself or for them, how I could warn the kids the juice.
Okay, you want to go ahead and give me the other question, too?
If there's anything I could do to warn him.
Okay, how do you warn kids messed up in this type of thing, and what can they read?
Well, the Bible is not a bad book to start with.
I'll go along with that.
And two, simply let them decide. The end result can be AIDS. It can be, any you name the bad thing, and that's what will happen.
Okay, Rhonda's on the line down there in Houston. Real quickly, Rhonda.
Okay, I just want to say I'm a senior in elementary education at University of Houston, and I have been collecting. I haven't started my unit yet because I think I'll be doing it for a class I have next fall. And I'm collecting material right now, all in child safety, and a part of it is how to prevent them from being molested and kidnapped and murdered. And I think this is very important because, well, look at the statistics of how many kids get it every year. Look at the Atlanta child murders.
Yeah, you're right. Dr. Wooden, something we haven't touched on that I want you to mention, because you do get into it in the videotape and so on. How does a parent approach this subject without creating hysteria and unreasonable fear in the mind of the child?
Well, what I do, Bob, and you saw it on my tape, what I tell children, hey, not everybody's murdering children, but, there are bad people out there, like when we have a dangerous weather system. Now, don't we have a dangerous hurricane and tornadoes from time to time? Don't we have a dangerous lightning storm? Of course we do. A child can relate to that. The beauty of telling them that is they're not living in a total world of fear. Not everyone's hurting children. But we have to know the warning systems of those dangerous bad weather systems that are hurting children.
Joanne.
Well, I just thought I'd tell you I have experienced my husband doing child abuse to my children.
How badly?
Not too bad. My son, he knocked his front teeth out, even though he's a teenager.
Knocked his teeth out?
His front teeth, his adult teeth, yeah.
Oh.
He has a short temper span, and if you don't do what he wants you to do right now, you're going to get it.
What, did he slap him or slug him?
Well, I think he jerked a pipe out of a hole and just hit him in the mouth. But other times, he has abused me. If you don't do what he says, and right now, and obey him, you're going to get it.
What, are you still living with this man?
Yes, I've lived with him for 22 years.
Are you getting any type of counseling, or is this sort of thing being discussed?
At one time, when my 21-year-old boy, the first time my husband hit me, we were under counseling with Pastor Frank.
Yeah.
And he's gone now to Seattle, but I right then had to decide. My mother said divorce him, and I decided I'd like to see Pastor Frank about it first because I wanted to know what God thought about it.
Well, are you working things out?
Well, now the kids are abusive. Just today, my little boy, who's 15, said, there's a boy that's spreading rumors about me, and I'm going to tell him today, either he stops spreading the rumors or goes to this girl who he told lies to, either he goes to him or I'm going to punch him out. So he's picking it up now from the father.
So the cycle of violence is continuing on. We have about a minute left. I want to make sure if there's something you wanted to say you haven't gotten to yet, would you like to take a shot at it, Ken?
I appreciate plus for her paper. Get a copy of Child Lures. Two, I want to say this to your listeners. God bless you and keep, supporting the work that Bob's doing. But I want to challenge them to get a copy of Child Lures and sit down with their children and teach them the methods that the experts are using. By the experts, I mean people that have murdered children, people that are experts in twisting the minds of children. Sit down with your kid, and in some cases you don't even have to sit down with them. Just let the booklet be there. They will read it. And most important, I don't care how young the children, 2, 3, 4, teach them about sex. And in our booklet we have a suggestion. Sex is like a bridge. A kid can relate to that because they know about bridges. Now, do you have adults driving over bridges? Of course. Do you have children? No way. It's a dangerous thing.